Hey, Gestalt Education Nation. New sponsor alert. Today, we're excited to announce Dynamic Disc Designs and Jerome Fryer. We have an awesome discount code for you. Just use the code Gestalt to get a little bit of money off on the Dynamic Disc Designs. They're the most realistic anatomical discs that we've ever seen. If you caught our episode with Dr. Stuart McGill, you saw an entire shelf full of them. Everything from cavitation instruction to disc dysfunction to SI joint dysfunction, all sorts of amazing
joint
stuff.
movement,
Yes,
vertebral movement.
Absolutely. So go to Dynamic Disc Designs, use the code Gestalt. As always, you can use the code Gestalt on Core 360 belt to get a little discount on the belts there. We love to use that for biofeedback for teaching respiration, intra-abdominal pressure, and how the abdominal wall should be working during function. And then the last one, use the code Gestalt Education 10. Those will all be in the description in the podcast. Gestalt Education 10 at humanlocomotion.com to get off some money off of all of his awesome gadgets and tools and rehab materials. What's your favorite, Brett?
He's got a trunk full, but I think, integrating the Toe Pro in, I think, has been a game changer for us here at the office. So I think that would be my pick.
Beautiful. All right, guys, don't forget, use the code Gestalt Education 10. Visit the show notes and you'll be hooked up. Thanks. Enjoy the episode. All right, everyone, welcome to another episode of the Gestalt Education Show. Today we are in Troy, Missouri. We're back on our home turf. It's kind of nice. We've done a couple of these in a row, Brett. So, yeah, the travel thing's kind of for the birds. So it looks cool from the outside, but it's not all it's cracked up to be. Today we are sitting down with, I feel really excited about this because I know that one thing is definitely going to happen, Tyler. We're going to team up on Brett because we got a couple Nebraska boys sitting here. So we have great memories actually in our rivalry between Nebraska and Missouri. So Brett, not so many good memories. So we'll
There's
maybe
one distinct memory that sticks.
Yeah.
Sticks with us.
I'm just thinking about NIT. We're watching a little bit of the NIT tournament here. Nebraska knows a lot about the NIT tournament. So
We don't even know anything about basketball. So let's not go
I
there.
don't think we even know the NIT.
No.
Although we did win it one year.
We did. Oh, that's
Yeah,
right. That's
we're
right.
NIT champs.
Well, with some Missouri boys, wasn't that Cookie Belcher and?
I think that was Juwan Boone, Eric Strickland.
You're right, Strickland. Yeah. That was a little bit later. Anyway, well, we're sitting down with Dr. Tyler Ideus. So Tyler is a former intern, Brett.
yeah, one of our superstars.
Yeah, add to the long line of this podcast. It's basically Winchester Spine and Sport intern and Ken Crenshaw, trainer. So that's about the only people we interview. So we're Tyler, you're an international DNS instructor. You are a past is it the Prairie Wolves, right? The Prairie Wolves of Nebraska Wesleyan basketball player. I've been able to shadow you a bunch because my family obviously lives in Lincoln, and so you just recently opened up a new facility with a new clinic and things like that. So we'll get into that. And I know that one of your new passion projects is force plates and measurables and things like that when it comes to athletics. So we're definitely going to get into that. But you also do you have any good Brett Winchester internship stories? Usually everybody's got one or two. I know I kind of put you on the spot there, but mine was a couple of them. Every day that would be, I would text my wife a different like Brett Winchester clothes story, whether it was like mismatched socks or like, short socks or missing a couple belt loops or I don't know, food on your shirt or anything like that. But,
I think the one that sticks out is there was one time being from Nebraska, I drive a truck, of course, and so Brett had to take some garbage from the clinic to the dump or whatever.
Didn't pay the trash bill up.
And he was pretty proud of the truck I had, and he comes back and he was most impressed by the lumbar support this seat had. He's like, man, that is a great lumbar roll there. That was what he was impressed about with that.
That's amazing.
That truck. I thought maybe it'd be, if you had like the leather seats, things
the
like that.
hauling capacity.
Yeah, it was.
The fact that he used you to haul his trash.
Yeah, I mean, God. He was all about that lumbar support.
I love it. That's a perfect story. Well, let's dive into, so obviously you're a DNS instructor. What was your first entry? I assume it was probably like a lot of us with Brett. And then what kind of fueled your passion to continue going? Because you're in Lincoln, so not a lot of people know, but you have a ton of experience with PRI as well. And so Lincoln is the home of PRI. So what made you decide to go all in on DNS and kind of that background?
Yeah, I was exposed to DNS. I think probably third try early on in school. And, the first course I took was at CIHP at Clayton Skaggs' office. And I mean, when you sit back and you listen to Pavel just kind of explain function, you observe him, look at the neurology and, how our central nervous system controls how we move. You're just kind of always wanting more, and even early on in DNS too, it was, you got exposed to a lot of different things early on. And so there was always so much curiosity with it. It was never just like this thing that was super clear, super easy, which I think they kind of like, that you have to search for that information. So then just that, just being so impressed by it, but then also, having to search for that information, dive into more, texts and more research and all those types of things just kind of kept you going down that path,
And it wasn't taught really well back then. So I think you were kind of forced to kind of explore and find the information, which a lot of times you end up better because you have to like kind of go on that searching journey to find that info. But that was 12 years ago, I guess, ish.
That would have been 2008, something like that.
It's crazy how much DNS has evolved since then. I mean, I look back at how we taught it then, and it's in a way, in some ways, a little bit embarrassing, but it's also a testament to, I think, like, it's really come like a long, long way in 15 years or whatever.
And then obviously just the results that you would see, at the courses, someone would come in, you see this unbelievably thorough evaluation, things that you don't even, maybe consider in the past being components of why a person, moves the way they do or have the, pain syndromes that they have. You see these kind of, immediate changes and,
rest kind of history.
The rest is history.
Yeah, I love it. Beautiful. And then, so you set up shop in Lincoln. You kind of had an in with a couple of the sports programs, and you still work with a bunch of them. But then, talk us through this new transition into a new facility. You've always been enthralled with technology.
Yeah,
you've always kind of had that in the back of your head, and so tell us about how you designed it, and then what technology you have in there, and then we'll kind of dive into the measurables and what's important and those types of things next.
Yeah. So, basically the fall of 2019, started a new practice called Lincoln Performance and Sports Medicine. And basically during that time, or kind of shortly after we opened the practice, then we were also putting up a new building. So, basically it's
right in the middle of COVID.
We'll get to that. So,
the business no longer exists.
Oh my gosh. So basically there was some friends of mine that owned a strength and conditioning facility. I was opening my practice. Basically we got together and kind of decided, hey, let's put up a building together. So, we found the lot, found the builders, and we put this facility up. And so it's about a 13,000 square foot facility. I think it's like 20-foot ceilings, maybe even a little bit higher. So there's in the range of the 10,000 square foot of gym space. Mm-hmm. We have just a huge, just open space of turf. We, have enough room for a basketball hoop. So we, get in our, awesome games and knockout, as a way to compete. And then a few thousand square feet of clinic space. So then obviously there's two separate entrances, but our clinic then opens up into the gym space. Mm-hmm. So in those scenarios where you want to watch somebody, walk, run, but then even, throw a baseball, football, hit a golf ball, whatever it might be, we have access to that in that facility. So kind of that cool gym clinic, scenario that's popular right now. Yeah. So obviously then when you get into that sports world, and performance, those types of things, our functional evaluations, those types of things are obviously super important, but then I also like, collecting some of that objective data as well. We've tried a few different things, but have kind of settled in on force plates for now. And just because it it does give you pretty quick and really reliable data, so as long as some of your standardizations are, they're kind of set in place, how you're queuing and all those types of things, as long as that stays consistent, you're going to get that good, reliable, objective data.
What's the brand you guys?
So we have Hawken Dynamics. Okay. Yep. So implementing those for a lot of reasons I'm sure we'll get into, but having that objective data that you can kind of pass on is nice. Yep.
And then you've messed around with motion capture too. Are you still set on motion capture? Do you still enjoy it? Where's that set in your mind right now?
So yeah, I mean, I like it. I think it's good. I think it's probably more a scenario where you have to be able to go really, really, really in depth with that and have a lot of time to do that in a kind of a private practice scenario. It might be a little more difficult to implement, some of that. And the good, reliable motion capture, at this point requires marker-based systems and those types of things. Right. I mean, to get the really good reproducible, data that you'd want, it's just a time-consuming thing. Sure. Not that it's bad, it's just it takes time.
Yeah.
Sure. And which sports are you using the force plates with? And obviously you're big into basketball, but what else?
So, I mean, clinically we're using force plates with anyone that comes in, and there's, well, as far as let's say certainly lower extremity injuries at this point. So if that's, runner, basketball, football, whatever it may be. So when we're using it for that population that has a pain syndrome, let's say I might bias it a little bit more towards lower extremity at this point. Mm-hmm. But then again, I'm sure we'll get into, we'll be using it more just for, non-injured, people just in baselines and those types of things.
Is it standardized enough that you can use it for like a lower extremity return to play? Meaning, like, do you have numbers in your head for this certain athlete that you can almost like an SFMA or an FMS score? Like these are kind of the standardized, or is it more personal? One N of one.
Yeah, I mean, for the return to play, the stuff, I'm not aware of any numbers that are in place right now on force plates. The big thing that I'm looking at in that scenario is how symmetrical are we, And so when you look at data from force plates, you can have, certain percentages of asymmetry. So when you start getting over that 10%, 15, 20%, then we're at least going to start asking some questions, why is that asymmetry there? If there's the history of injury, surgery, something like that, then we can start to say, okay, well, hey, yeah, you've had an ACL tear. When you jump, you're 20% difference right to left, and that could be on a braking, propulsion, or landing phase, whatever it may be. And then, then we in that scenario might kind of question like, hey, are you really ready to,
From a performance standpoint, what are some of the things that you do to change? Okay, so the numbers don't look good coming off the force plate. I mean, is it as simple as you give them internal cues to improve that when they're jumping? Do you rely on your certain techniques to improve that? A little bit of both, or?
Yeah, I mean, I would say as far as like immediate changes, day of, I'm not really looking at that, right. It's more of, okay, how is this information valuable, potentially from like a performance coaching standpoint, so if we're looking at power, obviously that's the combination of speed and strength, so there's certain things you can look at with like, like impulses. So kind of when you look at like a force time curve, like the space underneath the curve, if you're looking at like the braking phase, so impulse is looking at how much space is under there. So we could say, oh, okay, this person has good strength, but maybe they need more speed. They've jumped, but they jump slow. Mm-hmm. So if you're basketball, for example, well, we want you to get up in the air quick. So we'll take that and then kind of, say either, hey, take this to your trainer, your high school or whatever. In our facility, we have strength coaches right there. So then I can kind of relay that information to them.
And then you use it as an audit. So you're going to come back at 6-week mark. Is that how that works?
Yeah.
Or
Hopefully.
Yeah.
Depends how the case is going.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Which is kind of like in why we're starting doing more of this with some of your sports clubs. So like in Lincoln, for example, you have Lincoln Supreme basketball. So that's like your youth basketball club within Lincoln. And, they have several teams, from seveul schools at many different ages, from second grade all the way through.
Remember, you guys
summer.
are football state, though. You guys do basketball?
Tyler started at the bottom up. You know how you make change? You start with the bottom up. You start making change with the youth sports,
sure
and
we're
next thing you know, you got a next superstar.
Just give us a few years. We're in the rebuilding phase. Well,
heard that before.
Have patience. Have patience. Great things come with time.
That's right, Ross.
But so anyways, I think the next big thing then is what I really want to do is, like you asked, well, do you have a number? Like if you're going to return to play, well, do you have a number from the plate? Well, no. And I guess I'm not aware of any number out there. So the big thing I want to do is make sure that before, let's say, these unfortunate injuries occur, like an ACL, for example, is that they have a baseline metric. So where were you at the beginning of the season? What were your numbers like? Okay, God forbid you do tear the ACL. Well, guess what? Now we have this baseline, kind of like we're doing with some of those, preseason concussion testing, those types of things. Okay, we have the concussion. We did the cognitive testing. Yet we're good to go. Right. But how do you really tell if someone's ready to go if you don't have that baseline data first?
If you looked at 100 athletes, force plate data, do you have a pretty good idea of, one, how athletic they are, two, how high they can jump? I mean, is it that tightly correlated? Meaning, if your force plate analysis is, like off the charts really good, is that always a guarantee, for example, that you have good vertical or good broad jump? So,
vertical is the one thing it's correlated to is like sprint speed. So it's obviously very sagittally planed. From my personal experience in the clinic, the people that have, like the records as far as jump height, and some of those, type of, relative peak power and those types of things are some of the best athletes that I've had, so there's a Major League Baseball player in there that's at the top. I have a professional sprinter that's at the top, Nebraska football player, so it seems like it. I'm sure, obviously there can be outliers, but the best athletes, Division I professional athletes that I have are some of the best when it comes to jump height, and then it'll change a little bit on some of like your power metrics. If you're just doing like, peak power versus relative power, as the athletes get bigger, you'll have some higher power numbers, but that's why sometimes you'll take like a relative power number 2 that's going to have their, their mass calculated with it as well. So, but if you're just looking at jump height so far, I would say best athletes are going higher, right? Just in that metric.
Tom Michaud, he talks about like with the runners having what he calls dwell time, which basically means like after your foot contacts the ground, your slower runners or sprinters, they have higher dwell times, meaning it takes them longer to propulse out of that. Does a force plate give you an idea of like, do you know what I'm talking about by that?
Yeah. I mean, if I get what you're saying, I think, you have people that are able to get off the ground really quick.
It's the same.
Yes, 100%. Yep. And you even see different like jump characteristics within the force time curve. So you have, and you can be a high jumper either way, but you can be way more of like a knee dominant jumper. You can be way more of a hip dominant jumper. Some people are balanced. So you can still jump high, but there can be certainly different characteristics of how you're doing that, how quickly you're doing it, and all those types of things. So that's what I always say too. You can then start to kind of identify what I would say would be like some low hanging fruit, for example, where hey, yeah, this is just, this is a really slow jump. We need to work on, more of these kind of plyometric types of things too. So, yeah.
When it sounds too like you're marrying in your eyes with the force plate readings too. It's not just one or the other, right? Like sometimes you're seeing someone jump on the force plate, you're saying, I have an idea of functionally what that looks like, but I also, then you can marry it with the data.
That's right. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, cool. Because like Tim Hewitt, he talked about, we had him on the podcast for 2 episodes, and so he's like the foremost ACL researcher, and his number one takeaway, if he could do one test, would be like a single leg vertical jump, like a drop step vertical jump.
Yeah.
So are you thinking in the future like ACL prevention, ankle prevention, things along those lines with your recording, or what's kind of like the long term play here with all this?
Yeah, I think the big thing is, so first of all, we want baselines, and then we know that injury prediction is a hard thing to do. I mean, it's almost impossible. I know probably there's some things that can be predictive. So the other thing, as we look at large groups, I think we can at least be cautious about some people, not say like, oh my gosh, dude, that looked horrible, you're going to tear your ACL, but at least like, based off of what we see here, we need to do some more investigation. Yeah. So you have a huge asymmetry right to left. Okay, well, let's at least ask some more questions like, are you a long jumper? So have you just jumped off one leg for, years and years? Okay, well, yeah, you're probably going to have some asymmetry, or are you maybe just untrained? Just untrained individuals are more likely to have, asymmetries. Or, for example, you do that and okay, hey, there's some asymmetry. Oh yeah, well, I tore my ACL, 10 months ago, right. Or again, they're just that person that for whatever reason is really asymmetrical. Then we can say, hey, in our recommendation, you need further testing. Maybe then it's Y balance, functional testing, all those types of things. And I would recommend doing XYZ as, preventative in your case, or implement this in your strength and conditioning or daily, whatever it may be, Yeah.
Since you have a strength and conditioning arm of your practice, if you had to pick one exercise, you only had one exercise to improve like performance of jumping. You work with basketball a lot, so let's talk about basketball. Yeah. What would that one exercise be?
I would probably say controlling drop jumps, from double and then to single, just that dissipating force is probably at the top. And I think having the coordination, the strength, and everything to control that is important. But also, I think, one of the things that is found with people that, if we're going back to ACLs, is they don't dissipate force well. So they have really high ground reaction forces when they land. Yeah. So they land really hard. And then the other thing is their time to stabilization is slower. So they don't have they have more of that lateral kind of movement of their center of mass. So they land hard and they're not balanced, so if there's one exercise, I would say be really good at that.
So there's actually some pretty decent research too, like on a hex bar deadlift to improve people's verticals. Do you see an importance with weights and things like that? Are you using weights, or you don't think that's as important? Or?
I think you made me pick one. So So yes, I think that's important. And you always have to have that foundation of strength. Right. So early on, yes, that's super, super important. Eventually there comes a point of diminishing return on strength, Right. So then you want to work on other things, and, just depending on where a person is at, what you're going to. But the other thing is that a trap bar jump, for example, is a really nice way to create more of like a balanced jumper. So, some are more knee dominant, some are more hip dominant, for example. The question is, well, should we change that? I don't know that there's a right or wrong answer, except I would say if there's a more balanced way to do it, I like that. Mm-hmm. So then a trap bar can be a good way to create, maybe a little more of a balanced jump probably without hurting or hopefully improving their jump height, but at the very least, you're not going to hurt it, I don't think.
Do you guys work with your basketball players on like the actual technique of jumping, or not as much? You just kind of
not really, and that's where you would, I think, if you're doing an appropriate trap bar deadlift and you do a jump with it, it's going to come through that. I mean, I'm not going to say like, well, hey, when you jump, don't do this with your knees or whatever.
Because it's kind of like a fingerprint. You got to respect that everyone's kind of got their own style of jumping.
Like gait, we talk about changing gait or anything like that. You could change it with cues, but are they going to change it when they're not thinking about it or in a game or stuff like that?
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
I was on your force plates that you have.
Yep.
They also measure transitory force.
They don't.
Do you think, like if money was of no object, that's important to you, or?
Yes, it 100% is. That's where I think, with the way we have it set up right now, that kind of initial testing that we're going to do is it's pretty simple. It's quick. Baseline. A lot of people, those types of things. Now, in the scenarios where we need to dig deeper, for example, we find weird things, or you're just, super high end performance, or mom and dad want you to do it or whatever. Well, then yes, you can look into that. But when you start adding in, the more of that horizontal type of movement, then it's just a lot more, data crunching and collection and all those types of things. I'm not aware of any like cloud version that gives you, results in that plane. Okay. So just the vertical plane, like on a Hawken Dynamics, it's instantaneous. They're giving you all this feedback. When you start looking at the other planes, there's just more along with it, but it would be nice to have.
Right. And then what's like the entry point for someone that wants to add this, or like what would be your suggestions if they're like, I really want to start playing around with this? Like what's the cost going to be? How do you implement it in a reasonable time that you can still get paid and things like that? Yeah.
So, my plates, I think were in the range of like $7,000. And then I think in the range of like $1,000 yearly, membership to have the login or to have the cloud data and, the software for it basically. And like I said, the nice thing about it is to have someone hop on a force plate and do a counter movement jump takes just a few minutes, and so it's super simple to implement. Obviously you have to spend a little time learning what some of the metrics mean, learn the force time curve, all those types of things. Not a big deal if you're in this profession. It just takes a little bit of time. But the amount of information that you get back from that, you can hand, to the patient, you can hand to the parents, you can use as a reassessment tool, you could use with clubs in your area, all those types of things. Then again, if you're the one doing that testing and you find the scenarios where you want to look deeper, then you can be the resource for that too. So I think super simple, super easy, certainly a little financial investment, but as far as technology world goes and data collection, that's not too bad.
Damn cheap.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
And when you're bridging the gap between like force plates and let's just say the principles of DNS, I know obviously you're a homer for DNS. What have you found? Like, is it intra-abdominal pressure modulation? Is it joint centration? Like, what are the principles of DNS that are changing what you're finding on the force plate?
Yeah, I would say the big things that you're going to kind of, see over time or when you reassess is a balance in the symmetry as much as anything. Yep. So in my experience, I haven't seen a huge increase in jump height, for example. It may be a little bit better in certain scenarios. It may be the same, or it may be almost a little bit, worse, but I don't know that I have a big enough, data set to say, performance wise.
So it's more about like taking care of asymmetries versus
that's what I've seen so far.
Okay.
But I haven't seen the scenario where it's like your jump height goes up by 3 inches afterwards.
Right. I'm gonna give you a really open-ended question. Yeah. How much of raw jumping is genetics versus, I mean, if you have like just your average 12-year-old athlete and, you know, they have a perfect environment, they're learning how to jump really well.
Yeah.
How much is genetics and how much can be learned?
Yeah, that is an open-ended question with a long explanation. But I mean, everybody has obviously their genetic makeup, you know, but we also know that the environment that they're in is going to have a huge influence on their genetics. So if you take it, right, I don't know, if you take two athletes, one has, you know, let's say better genetics than the other, the one with the better genetics that didn't work as hard, you know, it can be matched by the person with less genetics that has worked harder, for example, you know? So everyone's going to have a ceiling, but yeah, your environment has, you know, a ton to do with that. Well, there was one study I saw where it was like, they did a study with rats that had to like go through a maze or something like that and to get food. And then basically they bred up these certain rats that did better and then bred down rats that, you know, that did worse. So then when they didn't change the environment or anything, the rats that were bred up they performed better. Then when they took the rats that performed worse and put them in like a stimulating environment where they were like practicing, you know, and nutrition and all those types of things, basically in one generation, they were able to overcome those poor genetics just by training, you know, so obviously your environment
gives normal people hope, doesn't it?
Yeah. Yeah.
Maybe I will.
One generation and you're fine, you know?
Well, yeah.
That's perfect.
Well, I think too, like the genetic freaks, a lot of times they don't show up at performance clinics because they're already so good at what they're doing, you know? Yeah. So I think the question everybody wants to know is, okay, so you got your average athlete who's 13 years old, you know, what's possible, you know? I mean, it sounds like you're saying because of neuroplasticity. There's
obviously going to be a limit, but
but I mean that
jump height, sprint speed, like if you work at it, I mean, obviously there's a ton of room to improve there, you know, but it takes time, years, and, you know, it's certainly not going to be a quick scenario. Like if you start sprint technique, and, you know, like the integrative neuromuscular training stuff at, you know, let's say 7 years old, I mean, the ability for that athlete to be a really good sprinter later in life is, I mean, it's huge, you know, but it's not like necessarily you're just going to all of a sudden become fast because you work on sprinting at the age of 17, you know, so environment over a long period of time, I think, you know, there's a ton of hope for that.
What for the basketball athlete? I mean, obviously we talked a lot about with lower extremity stuff. I mean, obviously, you know, we have shooting, we have dribbling. So, I mean, what are some of the things in the upper extremity that you find important for improving performance with the basketball athlete?
You know, I think for basketball, like any other sports, first, you know, the ability to basically, you know, transfer, you know, force through the extremities, but then to the upper body. So first of all, you want to be super stable, you know, connected between the chest and the pelvis. But for basketball, I think the thing that's really interesting is, you know, for your upper extremities, you have to have that ability to be very relaxed. You know, so it's a game where you're going hard, you're jumping hard, all those types of things. Your emotions get really high, but then all of a sudden, like, you know, you catch the ball and you're ready to shoot a three, like you can't be rigid, jacked up, and all those types of things. So then being able to have that perception, just be very calm, you know, get into your shot, gather yourself, be very relaxed. So working on some of that, you know, those things we do in DNS as far as having certain segments be, you know, stiff and stable, but have other certain, you know, segments be really relaxed is really important for shooting. Dribbling's the same way. You know, so those relaxation based exercises are good.
Well, not many people know, but Lincoln is a mecca for volleyball too, and so I'm guessing that volleyball has a similar answer that you just said there, of being able to relax your upper extremity to transfer force, because you don't have the ground to explode off of necessarily while you're spiking volleyball. So, we talk about that sometimes in DNS, of artificial support. Basically, does it transfer over the same way to volleyball, or how are you training that explosiveness with stability?
Yep. So for volleyball, for me, the big things are. Right. First of all, they have to, if we're talking hitting, for example, right, they have to be able to create kind of that, horizontal force, block it the same way a pitcher would, block that and then transfer that into your vertical movement. Basketball jumping is the same way. But the thing that's obviously unique about volleyball is you don't have your foot stuck in the ground to generate that from. So that's why I always say, basically, that in a volleyball player, like their glute, like their abdominal obliques literally have to become their glutes. So whenever I'm working on hitting stuff with them, that is the big thing that they have to be good at. And then obviously, you start them simple supine, but then I really like all the hanging things from them, creating more of where the pelvis is being pulled towards the thorax, but really working on that chest pelvis separation, but then also being able to control that separation into some lumbar spine extension. You're going to open, between the chest and the pelvis, but how do you do that? Is it just from being cranked on with your lumbar spine? Are you eccentrically kind of allowing yourself to get there? Are you still going to use those muscles then to basically, bring everything together in the front and then hit the volleyball, Well, and the arm then at that point is just kind of going along for the ride with your
It's like a golf swing. It's like a golf club and a golf swing. But that's one of the things that you've really been trying to tell a story of over the last 5 years, basically, is that having intra-abdominal pressure doesn't mean that you have to have perfect alignment of your spine. You can have intra-abdominal pressure in these other situations, and that's where you can. It's a perfect example of flying through the air where you have to have pressure. You can't have a stiff,
You can't be
braced.
abdominally braced there in hitting a volleyball, because you got to disassociate your rib cage from your
just
pelvis.
like in a javelin throw or anything along those lines. And so that's why the explanation is so perfect, that we're not teaching volleyball players to have stiffness and not move their spine. We're saying you need to be able to support your spine with intra-abdominal pressure. That way you can go through these range of motions and not tear yourself up.
Yep, that's right. Yep.
What do you think about, volleyball? I mean, definitely there's an epidemic problem with shoulder issues and low back issues. What's basketball's big injury?
Basketball,
inversion ankle sprains, just
what your lower extremity stuff. Ankles, knees, some low back, and probably as much as anything is you just see, at that youth age, is you just see that overuse. So a lot of the injuries, especially in the younger crowd, is they're playing basketball, and it's 5 games on a weekend in the summer, while they're also playing baseball, and they're also working out, and they're playing for 2 teams. Right. So now all of a sudden, you've played in, 10 basketball games, you've worked out, you've hit 100 baseballs or whatever it might be. So then it's, whatever, if it's plantar fasciitis, Achilles tendonitis, medial shin splint, all that good stuff. So,
what sports cross over well with basketball? Like a lot of times people who play, NHL players hit golf balls really well. Like, what's a good crossover for basketball, do you think?
I think what I see a lot of times from really good basketball players are like your wide receiver, tight end type of athlete, quarterback. For football, I would say some of the best basketball players too that I've seen are also really good at pitching and hitting. Is what I've seen. What my observation is, your baseball guy that pitches really well, or your quarterback. What I see from them is they're more of your like skilled, point guard type, kind of more cerebral, leaders, those types of things, getting everybody in the right position. And they're typically have like some of your best shot form, those types of things. Maybe they're not the most like quick, powerful, explosive, But then you see, like, let's say your wide receiver, tight end, defensive end type of a player. Then now you're getting more of your like four player in basketball. They're rebounding, boxing out. They're the enforcer. Every team needs an enforcer, to kind of rough the other guys up a little bit. And so, yeah.
So I always just say, I'm a wrestler, but I'll get you 5 hard fouls. So they may be in the first minute I'm in the game, but I'll get you 5 hard ones.
Yeah, you got to, for those softy quarterbacks and pitchers, you need somebody kind of like clearing the way for them a little bit.
Right.
Is there any room for like force plate with shooting or not?
Not that I've seen.
Not critically important.
Yeah, not that I've seen.
Mainly just for jumping and.
Yeah, I think just again, for me, just kind of creating that baseline, benchmarking, how do you compare to your peers? Are you improving over time? Like, I think it's something where, every year a kid has to do a physical to play sports. That's one thing you should do, and then how are you changing over years? How are you compared to your peers? You can identify areas of caution if you do get injured, so more in those areas than I would say balanced on a jump shot or something.
I didn't play basketball. I played soccer, but I was so lucky in high school. I had a coach by the name of Tim Walters, 2-time All-American in Indiana. Superstar. And what he taught me was that, ball skill is important, but like change of speed is what's so critical. And like sometimes with me not playing basketball, but like I'll watch basketball and I see like how important if you want to run by someone, like how important change of speed, energy conservation. There's probably like a lot of intangibles and
stopping speed.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's even if you're offense or defense, you're going as hard as you can for maybe a step or two, but then you have to stop and, immediately and go the other direction.
But even like Deakin's relaxation, it's moments of relaxation and
that's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, we kind of hit our mark as far as the time what we were trying to do, but I'd be remiss. People are going to kill me if we don't ask something about DNS and PRI.
Because the other thing too, though, MPI rep.
MPI rep, yeah, for sure. But I think there's probably no one in the world that has taken or has a better understanding of both worlds in DNS and PRI. And so I'm not looking for you to say, oh, DNS is the best and stuff like that. But could you maybe the people that are interested in both, or maybe just give an outline of where you see PRI fitting into your practice?
I have a really good follow-up question after that too.
Yeah, like what things have you taken away that you're still implementing in your practice?
Okay, so the one thing that I have always appreciated, obviously being DNS is the most important thing for, clinically, and my understanding that I've ever done, and I've with PRI, or you look at anything, in my opinion, it's still the best explanation for movement that exists, period. Yeah. With that being said, one thing that I think PRI did for me is it did really help me appreciate asymmetry and really look for asymmetry. If that's from a movement standpoint, if that's from a visual inspection standpoint, I did really gain an appreciation for asymmetry and understanding, there's certain points of it that are normal. I think there's points that are excessive, just the reciprocal nature of walking, running, those types of things, moving to the right side, to the left side, and just really having an appreciation for that asymmetrical function of being a human. PRA does a really nice job with that. Yep. Mm-hmm.
We deal, all professional sports, baseball a lot, where you have, a lot of the Major League Baseball teams are making an attempt to try to blend DNS with PRI. And to be quite honest, like that blend, sometimes then things kind of get watered down. Do you envision a Venn diagram where you have like DNS with PRI with a lot of overlap? Is it possible to blend those two, or is it just one of those things where sometimes the things just don't go together well, and you'd be better off just to pick? We're obviously
plant your flag.
Yeah. Do you just go PRI? Do you go DNS, or do you feel like there can be a blend?
I guess I feel like I've blended them. Again, it's. It takes time and it takes a lot of effort. And the one thing coming from a DNS background and then learning PRI, that my big thing was like, I wanted to give it its like, a fair chance. I mean, like really understanding it, diving all in. Mm-hmm. So sometimes I think if you don't get to the point of like really understanding something, then it can be harder to blend. So if you've done a bunch of DNS and you just dabble a little bit in the PRI, I mean, it's going to be tough, but if you really, take the time to really learn it, really become as much of an expert as you can, then it becomes easy to start blending, because you can, everything probably has a little hole or, a little area where there's maybe some question marks or whatever, that then can be filled in. But sometimes, those little things that you can fill into one system, you might not get in a, one course that you take or something like that.
We recently had, do you know Andrew Hauser or not?
I do.
We recently had him on as a guest, and he, had kind of taken a deep dive into vision and things like that. I think vision's the one thing, like we all get mesmerized for a second about it. Yeah. And then we all know its importance, but then we run into a roadblock because we struggle with how to actually take it and implement it in with our athletes or our treatment setting. So it's kind of like that thing that we all give lip service to, but then we all struggle with like what we're going to do with that. Right. What do you think?
So, I mean, so learning what I did about, so the PRI things, I certainly spent time with that too. I think there's some value in it, but at this, I also think like, trying to increase strength, those types of things, it takes repetition over a long period of time. So for me, the things that I've seen with vision that I like, that I've heard from patients and those types of things are more some of the tech things like your strobe glasses. Mm-hmm. For example, there's some different like virtual reality things that are helping you like, your reaction time with vision and those types of things. And so as far as making it and change in somebody, that's where I've seen some of those kind of be pretty valuable. Yeah.
I think it's kind of understated, but one reason I really am a proponent for reflex locomotion for vision changes, because it actually changes like how all the different eye muscles are coordinated together versus like if we use like different eye programs, like with computer screens and things like that. I feel like in a way you just like enhance the ability to compensate better. That might make your vision better from a performance standpoint. But then like, I always struggle to find like, at the end of the day, I'm like, well, reflex locomotion from a theory standpoint makes the most sense as far as like being able to change how the central nervous system is using all the muscles around the eye versus like these techniques where we're, doing different things where it's more like just teaching them in a way to just, do you know?
I think it's super valuable too in a performance setting. Let's say you're going to the gym to do your workout. Well, that realistically should include some visual components to it. As far as looking in different planes. Kind of like we have open chain and closed chain function of our extremities. Well, realistically, you have the same thing with the eyes. Oh, yeah. So that's where, you fix your vision on something and you look up, down, side to side, you keep your, some of those vestibular rehabilitation things, head still, turn the body, or head still, then you're moving the eyes in all those directions.
Or like,
so you have just the exercise of the muscles, even separate from how you're processing the information that's coming in, so I think that should be a part of any warm up that you do before you go into lift weights or whatever, even walking on like a rock mat, all those sensory stimulatory things I think are incredibly valuable.
Or I heard Mike Singletary, obviously one of the best linebackers of all time, him when he was younger telling a story of how he trained his peripheral vision, which is like he would focus on keeping his vision like obviously in the sagittal plane or forward. And then he would practice being able to like take in information in his periphery. Yeah. Which I think is so insane when you have a lay person be that far ahead of the game to kind of understand like how far or how you could potentially start to train vision in these different ways where in sports, like we don't really talk about Wayne Gretzky would be another great example. Like Wayne Gretzky wasn't a magician. He just had such great neurology to understand like sound, peripheral vision, things like that. And, I mean, are these people just neurologic savants, or is there something that Michael Singletary at some point was like, I need to get better at this, therefore he trained that skill.
Yeah.
Versus, and that's like the big debate. Like, is this a genetic? I mean, Vladimir Janda was like that. They said like Vladimir Janda was so good about like even training his vision of watching human movement and observing movement in his periphery.
Yeah.
Like, did he just like at some point say, I need to start paying attention to this? Or is this just some given skill that he has, the
way I always think about it is I think there's some given skill, but then there's also like the obsessiveness in their personalities
to get better.
That they find a way to do those things. Like they literally obsess about being great and better than everybody else all the time. And you're constantly like, just that passion that, probably realistically obsessive compulsive disorder that's used in a positive way. Like all those things can be negative or positive.
Do you know who Bill Bradley is, the famous basketball player?
Yeah.
So he goes on this transatlantic cruise, and like it's like a 2-week cruise. They're excited to, like they're going to see all these things. Bill Bradley, 3 hours a day, all he does is dribble a basketball, like in the bowels of this cruise ship, like with blinders on, just like working on, and I think that's a testament to that point. Like, which obviously that obsessiveness will, we've learned with Tiger and other athletes that can end up being a problem. But then you got to have a little bit of that, obviously, I'm talking about the golf. Come on, bud.
Well, that's what we have.
I would say it's not a problem, but
I recently had a patient, who's a professional athlete in the NFL, and that was like kept getting this one kind of injury, and it was like this obsessiveness, of a certain movement that he had to do over and over and over and over. And then, he's getting a little bit later into his career, and that realistically was like the big thing we had to sit down and talk about was like, listen, dude, like the amount of repetitions that you're doing, like you're not going to be able to do that for a long time. So then, with a mental guy and all that type of stuff, figuring out like the balance of that, how can you still go on the field and feel good and feel comfortable without having to, flip the switch on and off 30 times before you leave the room.
Well, I mean, rituals, and I know this from working with baseball players, like rituals are fine until you get to maybe you're at Citi Field and now you can't do your little ritual. And now your brain is so disturbed at that point because you think you need your ritual. Yeah. So rituals help in certain environments, but then they end up becoming like
That's
a
right.
barrier, because the second you can't do your ritual, then you're screwed.
That's right. That's what even when I played basketball, it was like kind of the way I grew up was always, it was very structured. It was, all right, we're going to sleep good the night before. We're going to eat this food. We're going to show up to the game, 30 minutes before. We're going to warm up, and then all of a sudden you get into, high school, college, whatever it may be. And it doesn't always go like that.
Yeah. Your flight gets delayed.
Yeah, some weird stuff. So now even I think for youth athletes, what I do with my son a little bit is like, I just throw all kinds of weird stuff at him, playing weird gyms or, eat different food at different times. And not that that's necessarily going to help him for that day. But then, if you're playing for a state championship or something like that, something weird happens to you, like, no big deal. Like we've dealt with weird things before. When we step on the floor, we're just ready to go. It's just a game.
Well, that gets exposed like in the, these March Madness games, because they get to like these bigger stadiums where like the optics are different. And then, you have the same dimensions, but then like all these different, optical situations where obviously the stadium's bigger, the stands are different, like the scoreboard's different. And
that's right.
Yeah. So I think you to your point, you want to like change the environment.
That's right.
Michael Phelps, trainer, tells stories of like they change the chlorination of the pool, they hide his goggles.
That's right. Yeah.
You just continue to mess with them without them realizing it. That way they're forced to kind of overcome, because at some point you're going to run into that tough environment. And,
that's right.
Yeah.
Beautiful. My camera stopped working, so if you're watching on YouTube, we don't got any video of this portion, which is good. So Brett just took his shirt off and he's swinging it around. Yeah. Tyler's got his pants off, and we've officially hit shit show status. So That's about right. So that's all right. That's the one thing with this podcast. You never know what's going to happen.
One thing I learned, we do play basketball in Nebraska. I did not know that before this podcast started. So
Here's how we're going to finish this, Tyler. I've been thinking about this the whole time. I thought we're going to let him go first, okay? Brett, what is your best memory of the Missouri-Nebraska football rivalry? And then we'll say ours.
I just never realized how good the Nebraska wide receivers were at actually kicking a football illegally. And then like to basically cheat to get a win. I mean, that I would say like that is, I didn't know they played soccer in Nebraska, but to see, thinking about Davidson's, infamous kick, how good the wide receivers are at one, cheating, but actually how good they actually were with their feet. I think that's probably the thing I was most impressed with over the years,
It's a decent, go ahead.
Well, I mean, I guess I would say, first of all, I mean, who hasn't heard the saying, if you're not cheating, you're not trying, right? So, I mean,
swerve into cheating. I get that.
It's passion. Yeah. He's probably obsessive. Like he wanted to win.
Well, knowing Tom Osborne, they had that play drawn up. I mean, that was just what it needed to be.
It might have been practiced. Kind of we were talking about the weird situations, weird environments. You may have to kick a ball. They probably went to soccer practice a few times.
Yeah.
But I would say probably my best memory was the Thursday night game, watching Ndamukong Suh toss Blaine Gabbert he's just a rag doll.
I know, it was like Ndamukong Suh throwing me around. It was insane. Yeah, that was a good one. Rainy.
It was rainy. It was a nasty Thursday night.
And I mean, Mizzou's field just getting destroyed too. I mean, chunks of turf. I don't think they've ever came back from that. So that was going to be mine. That Thursday night, Ndamukong Suh just tossing around like a rag doll.
The other one that was pretty good, I can't remember if it was the year. I think it was the year after that. Mizzou was ranked pretty high. They came into Nebraska. Roy Helu goes off for like 310 rushing yards, and it's like a 45-10 blowout.
Yeah. They were top 20. I think they were top 15 maybe. They were high. Yeah.
Then it was, I mean, you guys obviously dominated us for a while, but then we had our moment where, it was, those were the good years.
But hey, we're still living in the glory days.
That's right. So. Hey, we all are.
Scott Frost is the future. Oh, wait, we changed coaches again?
That rule.
Oh, okay, never mind.
Well, he had too much fun with some co-eds, and now we're on to Matt Rule. So
True.
Thanks, Tyler.
Yeah, my pleasure.
But I really do thank you, because you take care of my family, so I hopefully don't have to. So I know you have to deal with my pain in the ass dad every once in a while coming in with his back, and so that's
great conversation. Great conversation with your dad.
I'm sure he's talking about guns and Jeeps and farmland and
that's
whatever.
Right. That's what it's all about.
Rock music too.
Well, that's true. Yeah. Well, his name is Rock, so I see what you did there. So that was good. All right, Tyler, thanks, man, and. I appreciate hearing you speak and teaching. So if you guys can get a chance to listen to Tyler talk and learn about DNS from him, it's well worth it. And if you're ever in Lincoln, hit him up. He's got a great facility. All right. Maybe we'll find another bottle of champagne or something, Brett. So have a good day, guys. Good luck with patience. Yep. I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Gestalt Education Show. If you liked it, share it, subscribe to it, send it to your friends, send it to someone that needs to hear this message. We really want everyone to be able to tune in and get the best clinical advice that they can, which we're hoping that we're giving to you with these special guests. So if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us, or if you have any suggestions on upcoming conversations, let us know. For a list of our upcoming courses, we're adding them all the dang time. So go to gestaltedu.com, click on courses, and they'll all be right there for you. All right, have a good day.